I had nothing better going on.
Oh, that's the opening line. I had nothing better going on. Folks,
Whoa.
welcome
Wow.
to Talking Crit Live, where we are unadulterated, uncensored, and apparently
Unfiltered?
little libations have been had already.
Okay.
Yes, he has nothing better to do. So God bless, God bless. And actually, we were stood up. Okay, we were stood up by another bald man. So we had to bring in
now
the
let's
bald
be clear. Tom Tullis was sick. And so
He's
it just
sick,
happened to
alright.
work out that we traded one bald man for another bald man, which just goes to show that we are not prejudiced against bald men. Because
Absolutely not.
already on the way.
No.
I would have you know that I shave my head, and if I did not shave my head, I would have full, luscious locks.
Nice.
Okay, so there's strengthening credulity, and then there's just bullshit. And I'm sorry, but I love you, Jeff, but I cannot see you with a mane, right? I just can't see you with like 80s, what's his name? Jeff Winger hair. That's what I want to see. I want to see a Jeff Winger wig.
Dude, you need to see pictures of him from the 80s. He looks like Eddie from Stranger Things.
Yeah,
I mean,
I was
definitely.
I had the same jacket and everything with all the patches on it and the pins.
I actually saw today one of my local record stores bought a Beatles collector's entire collection. And so they drove 6 or 7 hours. He died unexpectedly. His widow sold them the entire collection. So they're starting to let it all go. And they've priced it to move, right? So it's buttons and so on. But they had a set of 4 patches of the Beatles as their characters from the movie Yellow Submarine. And if there was anything an RPG battle jacket really needs, it's the 4 Beatles from Yellow Submarine, right? I was like, But then again, I thought, when's the last time I wore an RPG denim battle jacket? And that would be
right.
I can't pull it off at 58. I'm sorry.
It just makes me sad.
Greg does it. Greg pulls it off.
Yeah, that's true. Gillespie can do it. But that's about it.
But that's part of the Canadian tuxedo, right? It's the denim jeans. It's the denim jacket. Sometimes there's a denim vest, but that's only for weddings.
Yeah. And then like the boots, it was like the Timberlands, or it was the Herman Survivors, or something like that.
Yes.
So let me introduce our special guest tonight. It is not the bald Tom Tullis who backstabbed us. It is the awesome Jeff Talanian, creator of Hyperborea, longtime kick-ass gamer, creator and writer, and he is absolutely at the last minute agreed to pop on because Tom Tullis is a miserable human being, and
he's sick. Don't be a dick.
Yeah, I'm sick too. I'm sick of him. I'm sick of Tom. I'm sick of being invisible also, but we take what we can get.
Why are you?
But no, we have Jeff on, and we're happy. We love Jeff. I mean, we would have Jeff on all the time, but he's just such a hard get. He keeps telling us no.
He keeps. The only reason you invited me is because Tom bailed.
Wow. Whoa! Come on now. Slow down.
Wow. I got nothing.
There's a little truth. There might be a little truth in that. I don't know.
That just hurts. So Jeff, I think the world's your oyster. We can talk about anything you'd like. We can talk about upcoming projects. We can talk about upcoming con appearances. I am always one to have sort of a Robert E. Howard chat, and Appendix N. We can do some deep dives. And really, since you were kind enough to come on, I think what we should do is sort of let you set the tone. Is there anything coming up that you'd like to talk about? Or
Jeff, why don't you pimp your product? Because we love people to come on and pimp their products, but when we offer them the chance, they don't take it, then they can just screw off. So why don't you do that?
Have you beaten the dead horse yet?
No, I've just started. I've just begun.
Well, beat yourself off while you're at it, all right? But in the meantime,
wow.
In the meantime,
is there a drinky poo there? Or, what proof is Eric tonight?
Appreciate the bold man that we have and not the
Yes.
bald man that we don't. All right.
Okay. All right,
Okay,
Jeff.
so first of all, Mike's a little too loud. Jeff's a little quiet.
Oh,
Okay.
So we need to sort of play around with the levels. I agree with
I'm
you.
screaming into the phone inside
Mike,
the car.
we're
so
going to
that's probably-
mute you before this is over. We're just going to
Stop it.
I'm a little closer to my computer now. I don't know if that helps.
There you go.
Oh.
Jeff, as Jim said, what's up? Let us know what's up in the world. of Hyperborea.
So
Thank
for
you,
those
Erudite. You are a gentleman. Thank you.
Of course. So for those of you tuning in who might not be familiar with me or my stuff, I'm Jeff Talanian, and I am the author and publisher of the Hyperborea role-playing game. It's a sword and sorcery themed role-playing game that is inspired by the works of Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, and H.P. Lovecraft, and a whole bunch of other pulp fiction authors. And the game rules are inspired by Gygax and Arneson and the original crew that were writing in the 70s and 80s. So it's a world setting and rule system pulled together, which is something we could talk about. Actually, I was kind of thinking about that recently, about how I'm starting to see more setting stuff coming out lately. People doing rules and settings together. So it's kind of something that when I originally started the game, when I originally published in 2012, it was the idea of marrying the rules and the setting together. Some people in some circles thought that it might have been a bad idea for me, that I should create a generic set of rules that can apply to multiple different settings. But what I really wanted to do was tailor the monsters, the character classes, and everything else in the game toward this setting, so that there's little nuggets of lore in everything about it. So it gives it not only that old school rules base of Gygax and Arneson types of rules, but also that pulp fiction flavor that I mentioned, that I know you guys all are into as well, as far as reading goes and all that, and you know, the movies we enjoy and the books and comic books and everything else. You know, Jim, I saw you made a great post about a month ago about Doc Savage, some of the stuff that you were talking about there. You know, just like all that stuff that I grew up reading, you know, Edgar Rice Burroughs and Jack Vance and Fritz Leiber, I can go on and on, Abraham Merritt. And so I really love all that stuff, and I wanted to see it in a game. So I've been doing it for a long time, doing it since, I started writing the game in 2008 and then published it in 2012. And published a whole bunch of modules ever since. I got some guys that write adventures for the game, and a whole bunch of great artists. And the current thing that I'm working on is a large city project called the State of Cormarium, which is something that I've been sort of tinkering with on and off for about the last 7 or 8 years, and decided to finally pull everything together and pull all my paragraphs of notes and outlines and little bullet lists and all that stuff, and I'm finally cobbling all in together into one big cohesive thing. So I'm having a great time putting that together. It's really probably the most ambitious project that I've done since I wrote the game itself. So it's taking me some time, and I want to get it right.
And so that makes me want to ask, right? So like a lot of things, when you have something that's been percolating on the back of the stove for a while, and I understand exactly what you're saying. I have 2 notebooks. One's devoted to one project, one's devoted to the other. And as these little bits and pieces come, you scribble the notes down, or you wake up in the morning and you're like, I got to write that in, and so on. So what do you think? What do you think the biggest advantage of this project is, and what do you think the biggest peril about that project is? I'd be really curious to sort of know how you internally sort of weigh that.
I've got answers for each of those. I think the biggest advantage of the project is it's a city that, for my own home campaign and for some of the modules that we've already published, I've been working with stuff in this city for well over a decade, since 2009. Since I started play testing the game with my home group. So this has been a centerpiece of that home play We just completed session number 373 just last night of my
Gee, wow.
So,
Man, oh man.
so many of those sessions have been in this city.
Sure.
And so that's the advantage of it. I feel like that a lot of it, there's a big difference between what's publishable and what is just your home thing that you're doing, right? So
Right.
it's taking that home thing that I've been doing and really putting it together so that other people can enjoy it and take advantage of it. So your other part of the question was, what are the perils of it? The perils of it to me are when to know what is too much and when to know what is not enough. And so one of my big game design philosophies that I'm always trying to remind myself of is the processing of information for the referee who has the material in front of him or her,
Right.
and making that digestible yet evocative. I feel like there are trends today where there's this really super minimalistic approach, which is great. It works well for some people. And then there's the super detailed approach, which is giant blocks of paragraphs that are, to me, impossible to digest.
Yes.
For me, the sweet spot is in the middle of those two, in which you have, digestible information, and yet it can still retain that sort of evocative type of feeling, and connecting the little dots of lore within the setting, and creating great hooks, and really getting the players to get invested into the game and the setting.
And so do you feel like, and I hear what you're saying, right? You know the setting like the back of your hand. And how much information do you want to put into print where it's something that somebody can use versus it's too much and somebody just is intimidated by it, or they buy it and it's overload and they sort of back off. I always think about some of the early modules where there was a box of color text for the player's benefit, and then the details of the room and the details of the encounter were further specced out for whoever was running the game. And I like that approach because it sort of straddles, it strides between the two worlds that you're talking about and the two problems, right? There's the modern, which is we give you the barest of skeletons to try to wing it. And then the other is it's monolithic blocks of text in 8-point type, and you're just crying and saying, please stop.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if given the choice, I'd probably rather have the minimalistic one and then sort of make notes as I go along, because I feel like I can function with that easier. But some people feel like, and I understand this point of view, some people feel like, well, it's so minimalistic that why did I buy this thing? I have to do all the work myself.
Right.
So,
sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. Well,
no,
I just feel like
that reminds me of the difference between B1 and B2. We talk about that all the time, that my car made this so that you would key it, but some people could not be bothered to sit down with the monster manual or sit down with the Holmes rule book or whatever, and just were like, oh no, I'm afraid. And Gary pounced on that and carved out B2.
Right.
And so, yes, some people are more than willing to step up to the challenge and some people just aren't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I understand for some people, they may have that creative energy and can do it, but they're just, some people have 4 or 5 kids and work 50 hours a week, and they just don't have the time. So they want to be able to just open up that booklet and have the information there to present.
And so do you see this as a companion box set with essentially laying, for lack of better words, but getting the fields ready for the 2 or 3 years worth of products that come after it that will just all tie back into the city? Is that what you sort of see it as?
Not necessarily. I think that I'm willing to go in any direction to tease out and expand on any part of the Hyperborea setting.
Right.
So like it will lay the groundwork for what you suggest. That will make it easier of different areas that you could because there's going to be plenty of like structures that are on the map that aren't keyed by any stretch, and it's like, and so the individual game referees can say, okay, I'm going to make this mansion be this thing that's
Right.
that is this cult living here and doing whatever, and making it their own, and expanding on it on their own. But also, like you said, you could also look at is adding more adventures. So we're going to have adventures in this. It's not just going to be a city with descriptions of its government and laws and taxes and harbor and factories and shops and all that stuff and marketplaces. It's not just going to be that. It's also going to be a lot of adventure hooks and mini adventures in there, and there'll be some adventuring outside the walls of the city where it goes into this sort of bog region known as the Lug Wasteland, where many other adventures can be had.
Right. And so when you're looking at this, when you're sort of pulling your notes together, is there anything that you think is really, and not to get into specifics, but is there anything you think that's really going to surprise longtime Hyperborea players? Are there things that you're finally sort of revealing things you've discussed previously? What excites you?
There's stuff like that, because when you get into a city that this is, which has about 40,000 people living in it, there are going to be, so the list of the gods in the game is it's going to be expanded, because when you have a city like this, there's going to be a lot of household gods that aren't necessarily the types of gods that are granting spells, but they're still divine beings that people pray to for various things. So there'll be different stuff like that, expanding on the guilds. There is, in some of those guilds will have direct impact on the players, such as the Thieves Guild, the Assassins Guild, there's a Harlots Guild, Merchants Guild, all kinds of different things like that, and in the various cults and how they interact with, with the city and potentially with the party.
Right.
So I think that all that stuff will help to contribute for this city and its sort of rich history that it has. Because in the campaign setting, this city of Cormarium was originally built by snake men ages and ages ago, but the snake men fell to ruin, and they became almost an extinct species. And it then later became populated by the native Hyperboreans themselves, which were a magical, long-lived race. And the Hyperboreans fell to decadence and decay and lotus chewing and all these kinds of things. And so their civilization had a cataclysm that it suffered. And then later there was a massive disease called the Green Death that was spawned by this comet that flew over the realm. And so the city for a time was actually lifeless. It was a lifeless husk until barbarians started to populate the city, coming out of the wilderness and arriving in the city. And those barbarians that populated the city then became, over the centuries, the new civilization. And so the city has this sort of rich history upon which it is built. And so that contributes a lot to its undercity and the cellars and the cisterns underneath and all that kind of stuff.
So I'm curious, right? So I can think of a half a dozen sort of, we'll call them city box sets or big city expansions. We can go all the way back to the very first, the Judges Guild, State of the Invincible Overlord. We can talk about a project that you might have worked on at some point in the past. We can talk about, there's the trend towards mega dungeons and so on and so forth. I always, whenever anybody talks about cities, I always talk about Chaosium's Thieves World, because it took what was such a great idea, the Shared Worlds anthologies.
Yeah.
And
I'm a big fan.
And then it pulled every piece out of those books that it possibly could, and it put them all into an eminently playable setting. how do you think about this and say, well, I liked some of that, I didn't like how they did that? Are there any highs and I mean, personally for you, are there any highs and lows that like, oh, I love these products, but these I felt don't really sort of, they're not gonna fit well with what I want to do with
Yes, I have a good answer for that. So, and it's because it is something I've given a lot of thought to. And so one of my favorites growing up that I referred to time and time again over the years was the first edition Lankhmar. And so
Yeah.
that was one of my favorites. And I was one of those kids who enjoyed filling in those blank spaces in there when I was a teenager. And I really loved that stuff. I actually wasn't until I was a little older, into my mid-20s, that I started to discover the Judges Guild stuff and started to get into that. And so I did enjoy a lot of that as well. Of course, the Thieves World stuff, I still have my box set from that, and I absolutely adore that stuff. There are a lot of city supplements that I've taken a glance at just to see what holds up for me, what I like, and what really doesn't hold up for me anymore. And I was actually surprised because I dug out. I don't want to get too much into negativity, but I dug out all my.
And you don't have to name specific products, right?
No, it's fine. I don't really care. It's not going to hurt anybody's feelings per se. But it's when I dug out all the basic gazetteer books.
Yes.
They did like 11 of them or so that are largely like city type supplements.
Yeah.
I found page after page within those. This is TSR in the mid 90s, right? By that point, mid to late 90s was it when they were coming out with all those gazetteers? So I found them. There's some cool stuff in them, but for me personally, it's just blocks and blocks of this fluff text that I just felt like this doesn't hold up for me anymore. And so so I see Robert Conley bringing up the Harn stuff. I love Harn. So I wish I had it all. There's a bunch of them that I don't have. It just seems like there's an endless supply of them. But yes, Harn is great. And I love the realism of it. And I love how, they can, they think deeply into all the things like, what a hectare of grain is going to, provide to so many citizens of a township or city or whatever. So it's like all the great details that I like to see and stuff like that. I don't want to go overboard with those kind of things either, because I feel like those can get boring for the reader. But I like to have it somewhat grounded in verisimilitude, in which you have some semblance of realism in it, and yet it's still sword and sorcery, and there's a sorcerer's guild in there, and necromancers, and there are things like that that are in these little nests within the city. One of the other things I went back to, going back to my roots, was the first thing that I got published with when over 20 years ago, well, about 20 years ago now, was when I was working on the Iggsburg project for Gary Gygax. So I dug out my Iggsburg book and I was looking at that and some of the stuff that Gary did, and even looking at some of the city expansions that I was working on at the time. It's funny, I look back at some of my stuff back then, and just like anything else, when you see your own works from 20 years ago, you cringe at some of the things you wrote. You're like, oh God, I could have done that a lot better. I could, what the hell was I thinking here? But that's human nature, I suppose.
Yeah. We are our own worst critics.
Right. So I've looked at a lot, but the other huge component, really roundabout way answering your question, the other huge component for me in developing this city is not just backwards looking into what gaming publications have done cool stuff. It's also just taking a historical look at actual cities from going back to say one of my bigger inspirations for this particular city is Constantinople, pre-1453, when it was invaded by the Muslims and became what is modern day Istanbul. But its whole history from Byzantium to Constantinople, that's been fascinating for me to study its whole progress and the Theodosian walls that were built to that repelled every invasion over centuries upon centuries. And so I love reading about all that kind of stuff and getting some idea of how that economy worked in its various ages that it survived through, because it basically from Byzantium, when it became Constantinople before 1453, it had stood for 1,000 years and went through so many changes. And so I enjoy looking at those historical models as well, just to not so much immerse myself in past role-playing game projects.
Sure. No, you can't. I think I certainly would not want you to slavishly copy Thieves World or lift things out of it. While you've been talking, I was thinking to myself, okay, if it was me, I would have a temple where I riff on the great bit in Burroughs' Gods of Mars, where John Carter discovers this gigantic statue actually has a secret door. And at the bottom of the ladder is the dead priest who didn't get to tell anybody else that, oh, by the way, the eyes move, there's a way to broadcast your voice, and so on and so forth. It's a great moment. And while a lot of the book is Burroughs taking a poke at organized religion in the 1920s and so on, it's still very evocative and very interesting. And yes, it's yet more plot armor for John Carter to get out of a terrible situation. But when he gets up in the statue's head, the idol's head, and then begins speaking to the crowd and causing them to all to flip out, and he makes there's a great moment in that. And I'm afraid that a lot of what we see, I hate to say it, is very rote. We tend to see the go here, run into monster A, kill monster A, go to B, and so on and so forth. And railroading exists to try to get you from point A to Z, but big open settings like a city, it's a challenge for somebody running a party. What do you do? You've got thousands and thousands of adventure hooks just lurking under every corner and tabletop, and so on and so forth. It's tough. It's a challenge. It's a great challenge.
You touch on one of the age-old dilemmas for the dungeon master or game referee, and it is the difficulty of the open-ended nature of running an urban adventure type of scenario versus putting them in a dungeon. Because if you think about it, you know how we criticize some dungeon designs as being railroad and all that? Well, if you think about it, all dungeons are kind of a railroad, because once you have them in the dungeon, no matter how many choices they have, at least you have, once they're within and once they're exploring and doing their thing within the dungeon, you have defined parameters within which you are working as the game referee. But when you're running an urban thing, your players can decide like, oh, well, now we're going to go to this temple, and now we're going to go try to find this alchemist, because if we're going to go on this adventure doing this thing, we could really use this kind of potion and see if we can get it or whatever.
Right.
I like to make all those things come at a price, though. I don't like anything to be easy. In which something is being asked of them in return. Like, if you really want this thing, then you're going to have to go do this for me. Kind of thing.
And that's what we like about you, Jeff, is that you're absolutely uncompromising in your desire to make the players. I mean, this is a good time. Jeff, what is your statement on rash adventure? Could you just elucidate for us briefly?
The rash and the foolhardy always receive their just desserts.
Yes, they do. And Jeff Talanian
that seems familiar. That seems familiar. It seems like there might be a story behind that. I don't know.
We've told that story too many times.
No, but tell the story, but don't. You can leave out certain names, but there has
no. We'll say his name. There was once a guy named Edwin who was a jackass in Jeff's Saturday night game. It was a celebrity game, and he was determined that we should fight some frost giants, and the party was not equipped to fight the frost giants, and he insisted that we charge down, and he said, okay, I'm going to go, who's going to follow me? And no one followed him. And his character not only died, he died horribly, and was dead. And then we looted the body, and there was no way to resurrect him. And then he sat dejected and crestfallen through the rest of the game and simpered and couldn't understand why his actions had caught up with him. And truthfully, Jeff I don't think you're the high priest of FAFO, but if you fool around in a Talanian game, you're gonna find out, and that's really the nature of it.
Well, Mike found out
I can tell you,
in Wisconsin.
he does not pull punches.
Okay, one at a time. Go ahead, Jeff.
I said Mike found it out in EGG Con this past July.
Yeah, he did not. When you say don't pull punches, it's like Mike Tyson going up against a third grader in our game we had. So there was no punches pulled. We got absolutely annihilated. So although I will cry foul, but I'm not going to go into details. But I don't think there was really any way we could have survived that adventure the way we were. And we lost half our members after the break. They didn't come back to the table. So we had like 8 people, then we had 5. Like,
well, that's not my fault.
That's right.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Am I expected to reduce the
potency
potency of the enemy monsters?
It wouldn't matter. We could have had 18 people. We would have destroyed us. This is an ass kicking waiting to happen.
Mike falls into that typical player that when things don't go his way, he's going to whine about it.
Jeff, how many people have survived that adventure? How many groups have gone through it, and how many have survived? Just those numbers.
Yeah, actually, that's an adventure that I've run. I believe that was the 6th time that I've run it, and it's been a TPK every time.
Oh!
So maybe I should adjust it.
Huh? Wow. Huh. I'm shocked.
Never my fault, though.
I've been in one of Jeff's games that was a TPK, and I would say that invariably it always comes down to players. Suddenly the spotlights go on, and the players they're stuck with the paralysis of analysis, or they've just completely walked past. I mean, it's like a Warner Brothers cartoon. Jeff doesn't quite have the giant sign that says this is a clue over the clue, but frequently you'll see people just blazing right past something, and you think to yourself later, I'll bet that's the MacGuffin we needed to get past the angry Atlanteans or whatever.
Without going into detail, I will tell you, just venture, it was a great adventure, except that I want to tell you, and this is why I love con adventures, because con adventures are to do things you don't normally do, right? And so if I was going through an adventure as a campaign adventure, there was a certain point where we would have looked at each other and said, yep, we're out of here. We would have walked off, and we'd have been great, right, Jeff? We'd have been golden. Just walked off and said, yeah, we're
that's
done.
Not exactly how that particular scenario goes when I run.
No, because we would have said, you know what, something's going to happen, and we're all going to die. But at that point, we're like, you know what, this is a con game. Let's do the thing that we should do because it's going to be fun. And it was fun because we all died. But before that happened, we'd be like, yeah, this isn't something we need to work. We really don't need to go past point A to point B. We're good, and we'll see you later, and we're done. But why would you do that? A con game is made for doing crazy stuff and stuff.
I agree.
You're going to push the button. You're going to pull the rod that you wouldn't pull. Yeah, you're going to do all that stuff because you want to see what happens. It doesn't do any good in a con game to walk out and say, nope, we're done. Like, oh, what?
Right.
Well, gosh, now we don't know what would have happened. We don't know what the bad guy would have done. And so, yeah,
Kim was in the chat, and Kim got super competitive. She wanted to win the thing. She was like, screw this, I'm gonna win, but it didn't work for her either.
It didn't work for anybody.
Never works.
It never works.
Not in a toy.
Hey, can I tell? I got a couple of stories to tell about Jeff real quick.
Oh boy,
because after that nut kicking at EggCon, no, I'm just kidding. No, first of all, I want to say one of the best days of my life, and I'll remember this forever. And this is just one of the most fun days I ever had, was driving to Cross Plains, Texas with Greg Gillespie and Jeff Talanian to see the birthplace and home of Robert E. Howard.
Yeah.
and just talking on the car on the way there about Howard and just all kinds of things, and then
Yeah, that was
actually
great.
going on the personal tour. There was us and two other ladies. That was it. There was nobody else on the tour. And then driving back and getting some good barbecue on the way home, and just talk. I mean, that was just a wonderful trip. It was just, and
Yeah.
the best part about it was just watching you and Greg, who I know are just gigantic, Pulp fans and Howard fans, just watching your reaction to actually being there.
Right,
Wow,
right.
we're actually in the house where Howard created these incredible works of art that have lasted, a century, and just watching y'all's expressions and just the way, I mean, it was very cool. I had a
My
great
mind
time
was
that day.
blown, really. I was just like beside myself to be standing in the doorway of that little porch where he typed away on that Underwood typewriter and produced that in a 10-year period, that body of works that he produced that resonates with so many people over the past about 100 years. And it was just amazing for me. I felt like it was such an honor and a privilege to go to that house. And as I understand it, they're trying to raise money. The house is breaking down. There's some serious issues with its foundation. And so I don't have the link per se, but if anyone else is a huge fan of Robert E. Howard and they are interested in preserving that heritage site, $20 goes a long way in it to helping that out, and it was such an honor.
The people that do there, the city and the ladies at the Howard Society, they just do an amazing job, and it's just it's one story after another about how just precarious the whole house. I mean, the house almost burnt down once when there was gigantic plains fires in Texas. The fires literally went to across the street, and it wiped out everything in its way, and it stopped right across the street. Otherwise, the house would have burned to the ground. I mean, for years it was in disrepair because the people of Cross Plains really never liked the Howard family. Didn't like Howard, didn't respect his legacy, and luckily in the 70s, Sprague de Camp and his wife made a point to, hey, we need to preserve this, and they donated money towards it because there was no money in the city budget to do anything with that house. And now they have Howard Days, where unfortunately it's usually the same weekend as North Texas, but they they do a lot of good work preserving it. So there's just many situations where that house could have just completely fallen down or burnt down, and it's just amazing it's still up. But it's worth seeing if you ever are ever in Texas or in that area. It's off the beaten path. It's not right off the highway. You have to do a little 3-hour drive to get there from Fort Worth.
Sure.
But I would highly recommend it.
Highly recommend it.
Just the point where you're staring at the room that's literally as big as a closet.
I know.
And that's where he lived, and that's where he just sat his typewriter every day, just pounded out.
Right.
No air conditioning and the Texas heat, and
those Texas heat.
It was a screened porch, It was the old porch, and they just screened it in and stuck his bed in there and his typewriter, and he just pounded out, the works of fiction that have inspired so many.
Yeah.
The other story was that we were at I don't think we'd ever really had a long conversation, you and I, Jeff. We were at GaryCon one year. We were in the big room with the bar, and for some reason we started I don't know why we're talking about Lovecraft, but we had a talk. I said, have you ever had any issues? Because at the time we were talking, Lovecraft was really coming under fire for his racism, and should we just totally, dump this guy's works and not talk about him anymore and not have anything to do with him, and and then we had a long talk about, do you blame a man for the time he was, he was a man of his time, right? I mean, he grew up and he had a very weird upbringing. And a very weird life.
Raised by
he was a weird dude. Yeah, he was a weird dude. And and so I just remember having such a great conversation with you about that, because I realized you're just at that point when we had the conversation, you didn't apologize for him, and I realized he's a cool dude. He understands this is just, you can't go back and try to sanitize history.
Right.
And, and you have to accept the art and sometimes say, well, maybe the artist is a flawed person, but the art's awesome.
Mike,
I don't like those disclaimers and stuff like that. I recently was in a bookstore and I saw this beautiful cloth-bound Dracula book. It was all black and it had this red foil masthead for Dracula on it, and the edges of the book were tinted red, and it had a nice silk ribbon and all this stuff. And you open it up and the first page has this disclaimer in it about the views of Bram Stoker. I'm paraphrasing, but it was basically saying his views were wrong then and they're wrong now, kind of thing. I'm like, I'm not buying this book. It's just, give me a break. I don't need people preaching to me about the moral values of someone who lived in the 1800s.
Mike, you need to know that Mike,
go
you're
ahead,
making farting noises as you talk because of your connection. And we've been trying to tell you for 10 minutes, but it literally sounds like you have the worst case of flatulence known to me.
Yeah, Mike, the comments are great. They're like, Mike has to cut back on the fiber before the live stream.
How do you know? First of all, how do you know those are fake fart noises? You don't.
No, that's the thing. Stop.
Mike, you need to go to a doctor. If they're not fake, then you need to go to the emergency room, my friend.
But anyway, I respected you after that, Jeff, because I realized that you're a good dude. Because I'm the same way. I don't think we need to make apologies or disclaimers for that kind of stuff. And
Thank you.
It doesn't necessarily infuriate me, but it just makes me roll my eyes when I.
Right.
Yeah. And so how do you? So now looking back, it's probably been 10 years since our conversation. Do you get problems from people that still write you and say, "How dare you glorify these, Howard and?"
Yeah, once in a while. I don't really care. I just move on from it. I don't even. I'm not allowing any people to occupy my time like that. That's fine if they want to shoot off their opinion like that. That's their prerogative, but it doesn't mean that I have to respond to it or listen to it or follow their advice in any way.
Well, I think also too, why are they saying it? Like I always, what's the motivation? Is it to create clickbait? We'll talk about people. We'll talk about influencers a little later in the show, but I frequently struggle with that simply because I think there's a time for discussion about things, and I get that. But at the same time, is this the selling point of your, is the argument the very product you're trying to sell? Is the outrage you're trying to generate? I think there's a lot of questions you can ask when you see these sorts of things. And I don't have, it's like you, Jeff. I just don't have bandwidth for this. I have stuff to do.
It's not like we're not making apologies, and Jeff's not making apologies because, yes, was Lovecraft racist? Yes. Is he a product of his time? Absolutely. And it's not about Jeff saying, well, no, I'm going to defend all the things he said and believed. It's that he wrote these incredible stories. What he was has no effect on what these stories present to your mind and your, and your imagination. And, and I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. So what's the last good thing you've read, Jeff? What's the last thing that you've read that you just were like, wow, I'm really glad I took the time to read that?
I'm reading it right now because it's a series of short stories. And so I had only read maybe 2 or 3 stories by Algernon Blackwood.
Oh.
And I've really taken a deep dive into his complete fiction. And
Yep.
I've worked my way into the 1900s now, and I'm like in 1906 or so for his writings. And wow, some of his stories have really blown my mind. You can see clearly the influence that he had on Lovecraft. We all know about Dunsany, about how he was a massive influence on Lovecraft. But it's in Blackwood, he does venture off into a little bit of what you could say is so a lot of his stuff is ghost stories, right? And a lot of them are these very gothic, spine-tingling, psychological tales of the human condition, right? And how we perceive these things from beyond. And but in some of his stuff, you can see that early sort of inspiration for Lovecraft, in which there are cosmic horror elements of things that go beyond the understanding, beyond the scope of human mind's comprehension. Right. And so his writing is just is incredibly evocative, and I'm really enjoying going through his works.
There's a lot of those. Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Jim. I want to bring up. Well, I want to bring up two other authors after you're through. So go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. It's fine.
Well, I was gonna say two other authors, and I'm sure you're probably familiar with them. I don't know if you've read a lot, but Robert Chambers.
Yes.
His stuff is a lot better than I thought it might be. Now, some of his stuff is not very good, but the stuff that's good, like the Repair of Reputations and the Yellow Sign, is really good, and you can definitely see where Lovecraft took inspiration. And then Arthur Machen. Great God Pan is one of my favorite.
Great God Pan, yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, so those are all what you could. So if you're going to pin down the pulp authors, and if you're going to define the pulp era as being sort of the weird tales era and the amazing stories and all that, if you're looking at the mid 1920s to mid 1930s, those guys that really etched their way into our conscious today, when you talk about guys like Robert E. Howard and Clark Ashton Smith and all the other guys that were writing with them back then, Clark Ashton Smith, of course. When you take that step, when you peel back one more layer and you look at some of the authors that, you go as far back as Poe in the 1840s, and you work your way from some of these imaginative writers that were from between Poe and Lovecraft and Howard, you can start to see how it built to where it got to.
Yes, I absolutely. There's clearly a foundation that gets laid, and then as more people play in that space, I for Halloween I reread the original Dracula, and I was really struck when I was reading it. I hadn't read it in probably 10 years, at least 10 years, and so rereading it was very interesting. I'm probably going to go back to Dunsany. There's some others that are on the docket. Paul Ganley, the small press, he did a lot of small press publications of some of these authors. It's very interesting. They all come in vogue for a while. They all go out of vogue for a while. Ballantine was one of the first ones to really sort of capture that in the late 60s and 70s. It was at the century mark, and they thought they it was good to bring it out. It's a lot like how adventure fiction, everybody always talks about H. Rider Haggard and She. And if you haven't read She, well, you should, at least once you should read it. You should read King Solomon's Mines, et cetera, et cetera. All this original, I'll call it the original source material that a lot of other things.
It was sort of that paperback boom in the 60s and 70s, right? That brought back a lot of these pulp authors that otherwise may have fallen into obscurity. We can villainize El Sprague de Camp, and I'll be the first to do so because of some of his the license that he took with some of Howard's works. But you can also give him credit that he and Lynn Carter were instrumental in bringing Robert E. Howard's works into popular fiction at the time. Yeah. And then, of course, you slap on those gorgeous Frazetta paintings on the covers of those Conan books, and it was.
Careful, down, Mike, down. Base yourself, Mike. Base yourself. Base yourself. Well, and again, when we look at what the roots of role playing are, the roots of role playing are squarely where all the late 60s wargaming that was inspired by guys who had been vets in World War II and Korea. This generation that's not only playing miniature-based war games. Suddenly, when they go into the bookstore, there's all these paperbacks that have all of this fiction, adventure fiction,
Right.
fantasy, et cetera, from the prior 100 years, some of which had not gotten wide exposure in the U.S. Some of it had, some of it hadn't. You know, for every Poe, there was a Robert Chambers, a Dunsany, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, when you look at the covers from the times, you know, these are covers that are, again, are very evocative. We always talk about Appendix N, but one of the things we don't talk about that we should is we should also look at what the books that were in Appendix N, what did they look like in the late 60s, early 70s, right? We should do a web page that has all these cover galleries because remember that Jim Ward ran into Gary Gygax in the book section of the store where he bought all these paperbacks.
Right.
You know, this is the stuff I a few weeks ago, I think I was on here and I was talking about James P. Hogan's Inherit the Stars. You know, he wrote the book on a dare. He wrote the book on a bet with his coworkers and somehow managed to get a Darrell K. Sweet cover painting that absolutely nails the premise of the book. It ignores where they find the body, but there's a dead man on the moon. And the back of the book is, you know, there's a dead man the man on the moon is dead. They call him Charlie, but he didn't come from our Earth because he's 50,000 years old. That's the back of the book.
That's pretty
and
cool.
Like, you read that and you're just like, okay, I have to read this. I have to find
out what's going on here, right?
Right. And I look at all those I had all those old Ballantine covers. I had all that. And when you pick something like that up, when you pick up some paperback from 71, 72, and you see that, that's what fueled D&D, right? Because somebody saw that, said, I'm going to pay 50 cents, 75 cents for that. I'm going to take it home. I'm going to read it. And then I'm going to write these funny rules for all my wargaming ventures.
Right.
And that's how it took off.
You know what's kind of funny when I think about it right now, too, is when you think about that boom of the paperbacks for fantasy and science fiction and basically adventure stories, pulp adventure stories, it wasn't just that rehashing of content from the early 1900s to the early 1940s. There was a lot of pastiche that was starting to be published as well. And a lot of that was hit or miss. But then, you know, we started
I'm sorry. Hold on. Wait a minute. Let me get Philip Jose Farmer's Doc Savage stuff out of my throat.
There you go. But then there was stuff that came along in the 1960s like that we just absolutely fell in love with when you start to think of Fritz Leiber and Jack Vance and Michael Moorcock and Roger Zelazny and all these different great writers who came along at that same time and were, you know, Karl Edward Wagner. There are so many of them that produced this brilliant stuff that was, sure, there was a lot of pastiche that were a lot of, you know, I'm going to make I'll make my own savage loincloth wearing barbarian I felt like a lot of the guys who did that didn't even get Robert E. Howard's Conan, because Conan wasn't a dumb savage by any stretch as Mike. No. He's super smart guy, but yes, he's a savage, you know, and he's barbarian. Right. He's in the might of steel.
I immediately think of Lynn Carter's
Thongor.
Yeah. Thongor.
Yeah, Thongor and Kothar, who are basically interchangeable in a lot of ways, but that was his. I'm going to try to take Conan and do something with him because Conan's doing really good right now, and they're not terrible stories. Just that very obviously pastiches.
Right.
Well, yeah, and you invoke some of the heavyweights of the 70s, right? Karl Edward Wagner, dear God, right? This is a man of many appetites who's
medical doctor,
just fueled an amazing work at the typewriter. You know, I have the collected Karl Edward Wagner.
Kane still needs to know better than he is. Kane is not as well known as it needs to be because the Kane stories are amazing.
Oh yeah, he is
Absolutely.
the quintessential anti-hero and a huge inspiration for a lot of my stuff because the Kane, Karl Edward Wagner's Kane, the setting of Kane's stuff is sort of this far-flung future Earth in which there is sorcery, but there's also these ancient sort of technological marvels that could be unearthed like artifacts. And I love that kind of stuff, adding those sort of um, science fiction elements as ancient artifacts in a sort of D&D type of setting.
Oh, Gene Wolfe, the book of,
Oh.
Severin the Torturer. What an amazing cycle. The book
It
of
was
the
disturbing.
oh,
I read that and I was like, I don't want to read more, but I have to read
I
more.
have to read more. And I've talked about this on the show before, where it's in the first book, and Gene Wolfe describes a picture on the wall, and it takes you a while to realize that what he's describing, which is this ancient picture, is actually a picture of a man on the moon in the spacesuit. It's a picture of one of the Apollo astronauts on the moon. And when you get that, your head just explodes, right? It's such a great series. I just love it,
Right.
And Michael Moorcock, right? Here's a guy who just decides, I'm going to tackle all the genres. It doesn't matter what they are. I'm going to tie them all together and get out of my way, kid, because here I come. And
Right, his multiverse is just incredible. I've been rereading all the Corum books, and I'm on the 5th one right now. And I just love Corum because he's basically a shade of Elric in a way. They're all incarnations of the Eternal Champion. But he is he's a nice guy. He's easy to root for. Elric can be a son of a bitch.
Elric is the worst, best anti-hero.
Right.
Oh my God, the man, he mopes everywhere. He kills his friend. The sword wins in the, like, it's just, right. How can I root for you?
Right. It's easier to root for Corum and Hawkmoon because they're more in the vein of a prototypical hero trying to do good things. Hawkmoon's going against the great forces of Grand Breton, which is this massive technological empire that is taking over all of that version of the multiverse's Europe. And he flees to the American continent at one point, and it's just everything is sort of familiar, but not. It's like geographically familiar, but the things that are going on are different, but yet they're sort of like reflections of things that have gone on in real world history. It's just this brilliant sort of layering of things that Moorcock is a master of.
I remember when White Wolf decided that they were going to publish what they felt were the definitive editions of authors' works. And they poured all this amazing effort into trying to get the best, the manuscripts correct and all the things. The project, the crowdsourced project that comes closest is probably the Jack Vance VIG edition.
Oh yeah.
Where they had teams of editors working on all of this and getting every last word right, and then they did these amazing hardcover sets that were a fortune. But now,
right? Wasn't he still? He was still alive at the time, I believe.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that he ever responded to any of my posts, but I used to interact a little bit here and there on his forums that he had. Typical forums.
Yeah, the VIG, the Vance Integral edition.
The Vance Integral edition, yeah.
I just, and we need people to do something like that for all these authors that we're talking about. I'm probably on my list of things I'm going to go back and reread are Sax Rohmer's Fu Manchu. I'd really like to sort of dive into those again.
Yeah, Gary was a big fan of that stuff. He brought it up a few times when he and I spoke about different pulp fiction stuff.
I'm trying to think. I have all the Shadow. I have all the Shadow to read, all the pulp novels.
What about the Shadow radio broadcasts? Is there any place we can get those, or are those on YouTube or anything like
that? They're actually owned by most people, and so it's hard to find those. I know a guy for some of this stuff, but I don't know a guy for all of that. You know, one of my favorite shadow radio shows is this tells you how people thought to how to portray millionaires in the 30s and 40s, because the shadow has to deal with somebody who owns his own submarine. Like, how do you just walk into Electric Boat and say, "Hey, you guys in Groton, make me a submarine. Get to it."
Yeah.
With torpedo tubes, that's a great idea.
There's some of that goes on in Doc Savage as well. You know, when you read a bunch of Doc Savage books, which I've done some, I've been revisiting those in the last year and beginning to read through some of them. And there's some of that sort of impossible stuff that happens in those stories. You know, he gets
and I love Doc, but like he flat out steals the Helldiver. He flat out steals the submarine that they go to the Arctic in, right? He just keeps it and uses it from then on. That's like his personal submarine.
Right.
But Jesus, you know, at one point I read Philip Jose Farmer's Apocalyptic Life, and he has the stats, and God, Savage goes through how many dirigibles? Like he goes through like 11 dirigibles.
You
like
think he learned his lesson? Yeah. You think he learned his lesson, like losing the 6th dirigible, but nope. Sorry, we're gonna travel to South America in another dirigible, and it's gonna burn up and blow up again. So
yes.
I'm not familiar with that style. I never read Farmer's versions of Doc Savage.
Oh, you shouldn't. You should not. You should not. You know, the only thing to read is Apocalyptic Life, because there's some stats and so on that's kind of interesting, but even then it's pretty dated, and there's so many other better. You know, William
Don't
Murray.
read the Mad Goblin. And what was the other one?
Sorry.
Yeah, the Mad Goblins. And there's a Lord of the Trees and the Mad Goblin. That's his versions of Tarzan and Doc Savage, and they're very subversive. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Extremely subversive.
Yeah. Well, and less said the better. The less said the better.
Very much.
So, I don't know, Jeff. Like when you talk about the city coming, do you see it as something for 2026? Do you see it for something?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a 2026 project.
Yeah,
you know, I've come a long way with it, and I feel good about it being. You know, I had high hopes. If you would, you know, when I started to talk about it to various people about a year ago, I had high hopes that it was going to be, you know, by this time this year, by the end of the year, I'd be doing something. But no, I'm still working on it. So, and I'm not going to rush to, you know, have something that's less than what I want it to be.
Sure, absolutely. I think anybody who knows you knows to expect that you're not going to ship something that's not fully baked.
Right.
The hallmark of all of your publishing, Jeff, is high quality. Not I'm getting it out the door because I need to hit my goals for fourth quarter.
Right. I want it to be high quality writing, high quality art, and I always want the highest standards of production values of the books themselves, between the covers, the paper, Smithsonian,
right?
Nice readable, larger fonts, you know, and layout that is clear and readable and not distracting and with background images.
What, you like the older eyes? You're going to appeal to people our age?
Well, you know, I'm 54 years old and I'm not getting any younger, so I need to be able to see this stuff too.
I'm promising the first ever large captions.
Right.
Reader's Digest.
Right.
Oh my God, that's terrible. That's terrible.
Reader's Digest. You're dating yourself. Do you hear the Farmer's Almanac is ending?
What?
I look forward to the large print editions of all your modules. I'm so old, I remember when it used to be in tiny words. Oh.
I could read them.
Yeah, Jeff, I saw that article about the Farmer's Almanac ending. Did they really get? I guess they weren't making money on it. Nobody was buying because they're on the internet now. What was the reasoning?
I don't know.
But I'm sorry, I'm way too connected to this. There's actually two Farmer's Almanacs, because like all of these sorts of things, the original was copied, and it is the pale imitation Farmer's Almanac that is going out of business and is not surviving.
Oh, well, okay.
That's what I've been told. That's what I've been told by farmers. So make of that what
you heard it from farmers. if farmer said it, it is true because it's the farmer's almanac.
Oh,
So,
you know.
absolutely. Okay, well, I feel better then. I don't feel as because I
Okay,
read that.
it's
I
just
thought,
the
well, that
imposters
really
then.
sucks.
The hell with those imposters, anyway.
That's right. Crom says to hell with you. Hell
Well,
with
Jim,
you.
I mean, or Jeff, I do feel I am really glad that you. Believe me, I appreciate the large fonts and the clear layouts as I talked about several shows. That my buying needs have really circled around that. From at this point, if you have lots of colors and snazzy, weird, sideways writing, and
Right.
I'm out. I just can't do it. Sorry.
You know, it's like one of those things, like, could I make it? And so in some cases, say I have a saddle stitch booklet and it goes up to something like, because of my font choices and because of my margins that I'm giving it, could I make that 60-something page book be only 48 pages? Sure. And then maybe if it's 48 pages, maybe I can just charge $20 for it instead of, say, $24 for it. Sure. But at the end of the day, I think that most gamers who are looking for a quality adventure module that are going to run the module for that group over a span of 3, 4, 5, up to 8 sessions sometimes for some of these, then I still think it's a small price to pay for a quality presentation.
Yes, I'd agree. I think when you get down to quibbling over a few dollars, you're never going to regret erring on the side of great art. And I have a great example of this. So there is a company that is reprinting John Campbell's Who Goes There, the original root novel of The Thing. And there is an author who has written the events of that book from the perspective of the creature.
Oh, cool.
And the perspective of the creature, because it is a thing without form, because it is not a biped, you know, it can assume whatever it wants and so on and so forth. The book is being printed with English text and illustrations and so on. But if you have a black light, and I don't know if they ship you one with it or not, but if you have a black light and you shine it on the pages, there are things that you cannot see unless you have the black light to give you a sense of what it's like to be the creature and how it sees things and how it perceives things. And I think the book is $200. It hasn't come to it's such a niche project that, like, the trade edition is $200. The collectible edition is $1,200 or $1,500. But it looks astounding. And they've taken this great idea of trying to give you a way to present what it's like to be the creature, right? If you want to think like the creature in its human form, you can just read the book. But if you want to get an understanding of what the creature perceives and what the creature sees and senses and so on and so forth, that's what the black light is for. And it's a very, very clever idea, but it's one of those sort of out there ideas that I don't see this filtering down into RPG publishing anytime soon. It's going to be cost prohibitive, but it's what's possible with the printing technology, and I love that. I love seeing these sort of new explorations and so on. So,
that's neat. I like that.
Yeah, and
a little more affordable.
Bungie did it actually with one of the Halos, where the collector's edition, like 2 years after it shipped, I think it was Halo 3, but 2 years after it shipped, somebody happened to hit their collector's edition with a black light and discovered all this stuff that nobody had noticed before. It was like 2 years after it had shipped out and so on, but nobody had thought to hit it with the black light and discovered all this lore and all this nitpicky detail and so on and so forth. It was really clever.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like stuff like that. I like interesting ways to make your products different.
Right.
That's.
I hear if you hit Tom Tullis's minis to the black light, you get some disturbing revelations there.
No. Where's the mute button for Mike?
I thought this show was PG.
No.
not at all.
With PG-13 at best, we often.
Yes.
What's your next show that you're headed to, Jeff? Where are you making the rounds next?
I believe my next show is going to be TotalCon in February.
Ooh,
Wow.
very cool.
Yep.
Okay. So now the other question is, I've heard all about how over the summer you deployed the most powerful weapon in your arsenal, which is your lovely spouse. Is there any chance that she will be visiting North Texas this year? Because
I
believe-
don't know,
Yeah,
because
I
she was
believe-
able to pull it off because she was out of work after a surgery. So it's possible.
the
I'm going to talk to
petition
her
had
about it.
been there for a while. I believe the petition was started, and I think she was such a big hit with everybody that we're now more interested in having your wife as well. So please put that note out there.
Okay, I will talk to her. I'll let her know.
That it's a requirement that she attends North Texas. So,
There you go.
yes, that would
be nice.
I heard, oh, Jeff ran me through this adventure and it was great, or I did this, but everybody's like, oh my God, and his wife's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah, we hung out with Zach and with Mike and
By the way,
Kim and a bunch of people, so it was fun to introduce her to some of my friends
yes,
whom she'd never met before.
Econ was great. And, I don't know what she sees. I'm gonna have to be honest here, and
Right.
I feel sorry for her in a
Well-
lot of ways, but no, she was wonderful. She's absolutely wonderful.
Well, I was fortunate because I discovered her at the School for the Blind and Visually Impaired, so it was, helpful there,
That makes
I don't
sense.
feel safe
was
making
true.
a joke in these modern times, so I'm just gonna let that one lay there. That's pretty. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, I had something. Oh, let's segue into some other things that we should absolutely cover. I think. Now, let me ask you this: are you guys, Jeff? Are you and your family sort of invested in Stranger Things? Are you counting
Yes.
down to the next season, the last season?
So my 18-year-old daughter has basically grown up with Stranger Things at this point, because what is it, like 3 or 4 years in between every season?
Yeah,
Because it's
pretty
been
much.
9 years for the whole freaking thing. Yes, of course she's getting driven.
Yes. So
grown up
she's
with
been
it.
watching it
It's
since she
9
was
years.
9. And so she is hugely into it. And in fact, she just called me shortly before I came onto this wonderful show and told me that we need to go see the final episode of Stranger Things in the theaters. I'm like, okay, sounds fun.
It's going to be on the
At
big
least she
screen.
still
That's
wants to
awesome.
be seen with you. That's the positive, right? She's still happy to do stuff with you, so you should take
Yeah,
advantage of
She's
that.
coming
while
with me
you
to
can.
Origins again this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I put it to work.
Excellent. It's a
That's
family
what you
affair, right? That's the. So does she write, or does she? Is there any part of your
She's
craft?
done some drawing. In fact, I have some of her pictures in my books. I have 2 or 3 pictures that she's done for me before. Yeah, she's
Marvelous.
she's a good artist when she sets her mind to it, but she has interest that wanes and waxes in doing so.
I'm sorry. I believe what I heard you say is there are distractions.
Yes.
Yes,
She's
I
a
think we're
teenager,
all.
in other
yeah.
words. Yeah.
Anybody who has had a teenager in their life, yes, there are distractions.
Yes.
I don't know. We've got some interesting nuggets for this week. Mike, do we want to talk about shameless YouTubers and influencers?
Oh, why not?
Oh, I think we have to. I had a
this is my favorite
bizarre
subject.
encounter with one that. You go first.
Who are we going to talk about first? I mean, which shameless influencers shall we?
I have one, but I'll wait until you're done. You go ahead and talk about our printed ballot.
I just happened to be moseying around Facebook, and I found one of our favorite human beings, Satine Phoenix, is once again finding her muse and inspiration in Bali, of all places, where we all know that down and out and barely surviving on their own dollar influences can head for a few weeks and go to a health renewal.
It's a cheap vacation to have your fans send you on.
Well, and why would you want to work on a long overdue Kickstarter project when you could go find yourself in Bali? right?
You
I
must
mean, that's
balance
really the
mind
heart
and
of it.
body. Jim,
Jeff,
you
when
have
you've
to
had to
balance
fulfill
mind and
Kickstarters,
body.
isn't that when you go on long vacations that hopefully somebody else has paid for?
I'm
I've
ashamed of
actually
you,
done the
Jim. How
exact
can you be
opposite.
expected
I've,
Wait,
be
Jeff's got a
expected to
zinger,
work
Mike.
on this?
Hold on. Go ahead, Jeff.
How can you be expected to work on anything when you haven't balanced your mind and body?
Jeff, it's your turn. Go.
I was just going to say the thing that I've done when I have a project that's coming up and I feel pressed for time, and especially when you've already taken people's hard-earned money in advance. The thing that I've done a few times is I've actually gone and rented a hotel room and just isolate myself and just work feverishly with zero distractions.
In Bali.
No, Fiji.
Yes.
He went to Fiji.
Yes,
Come
because when you picture Jeffrey Talanian trying to get his stuff done, that's what you picture is he's just decided to jet off to Bali with all the money from the Kickstarter.
Don't worry about it. It's cost effective with the amount of output Jeff's going to have in that time.
Right.
It's well worth your investment.
Yes.
If you're still, never. I can't even say what I want to say. That I like, unlike Jim, I sometimes hide my feelings because if I had to say what I want to say right now, I'd probably get in trouble. But if you're still giving money to this grift, God love you. Whatever.
Well, I still see Jameson pop up in my feed on Facebook with his poses, talking about how great he is shirtless, and I don't want to see members of this community, no matter what shape they're in, shirtless. I'll just say, sorry, male members. I need to preface that properly. I don't want to see male members of this community shirtless, no matter what shape they're in, because they're not. I don't want to know. I don't want to know.
I'm shirtless right now, so I guess that worked out good that I'm in the darkness.
Mike, I don't want to see you. I'm very glad we're not seeing you shirtless.
Okay,
I like to drive. I like to drive shirtless.
Now, amusingly, I was not only unfriended this week, but I was blocked. I was amusingly blocked by
Dan Proctor.
No,
sorry.
By one of these people who has a YouTube channel where, for I think a number of years they've plugged away at trying to have success and so on and so forth, and like a lot of things, I watch things occasionally, and if there's a certain production value that it doesn't hit, I usually don't come back or whatnot. But this is somebody who used to, in a couple of the Facebook groups I used to manage or still manage, we had rules about posting, right? And this person essentially was like, well, those are rules for other people. I am going to post every day, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to redirect everything back to my show. And I was like, no, you're not. And he didn't like this, and he went to other admins, and no, you're not. And so interestingly, this week, and I tried very hard to think about had I said something or I hadn't referred to him or whatnot in a decade, like in years. I think we might have made a joke about this person like a few months ago, but who cares, right? But anyway, they blocked me. They unfriended, like they blocked me, which is pretty funny. And so, when your videos are garnering like 67 views and one of them is from the same person watching it like a half a dozen times, I don't know what to say. If you're going to keep hitting me with like and subscribe or share my link, or we can't be friends on Facebook unless you share my links to my show and so on and so forth. If that's the center of your being, I think, again, just like going to Bali to find yourself when your Kickstarter is due, long overdue, I think it says a lot more about you than it does anybody else. I don't share a lot of stuff on Facebook. I think if you are friends with me, you know that I'm not one of those people that's going to carpet bomb you every day. Right. I try to be very discretionary about links that I share because I want to be confident. I find it hard to share links to crowdfunding and projects unless I really believe in them, and if I do, I will. When you twist my arm and hold over my head that we can't be friends unless I'm constantly spamming your YouTube channel, I don't respond well. I will not, and I think it's part of the problem with influencers as per se. I see we've lost Mike again.
Yeah, he's gonna come back.
I don't know. So Jeff, when you see influencers, when you see people who have overdue Kickstarters and so on, I mean, you're a guy that's shipped everything that you've owed people. You're a guy that's been very above board. I've watched you set up as the one-man band at conventions. I know that there are times where you'd like to get away and just go have a hot dog and sit quietly and not have to have the Edwins of the world complaining about how you killed their character. I mean, you do this because you love it. What's the thing you love about it the most? What's the thing that being the publisher of Hyperborea, getting on shows like this, what is it what you love the most about it?
I love the creative process the most. I think if I had my way, I would be writing more and maybe eventually less involved with the logistics aspects of running a small publishing company. And everything that has to do with that, with product fulfillment and customer service and all that. It's not to say that I don't appreciate, my customers and answering their various needs and issues that arise with, with shipments and things like that. Where's my tracking number because the email that automatically generated their tracking number bounced or something like that. All the little stupid things that take a few minutes of your time. Those are the things I don't like as much, but the things that I really love the most is the creative process of coming up with an adventure scenario that gamers, I guess the thing that's the most, the thing that I derive the most satisfaction from is hearing that people actually ran the stuff that I created and sharing their stories of running it and talking about the different outcomes that happened. And so I really enjoy hearing that people engaged with something that I came up with and had a good time with it. Because, I always say there's so many games out there and there's so many adventure modules and all kinds of products out there and supplements that there's so many of them just get relegated to shelf space, right? And we look at it, this is cool, has a cool cover, it sounds neat, and then you stick it on a shelf and you never look at it, right? And so it's always an honor for me to hear that someone bought something from me and then a few months later they're running it with their group and they're having a good time with it. And that's always the most satisfying thing for me to hear.
And when you put your things out in the wild, and then these little stories and these little drips and drabs come in and so on, what's one of your favorite stories like that? What's one of the occasions where you just you went around the house doing the high fives and feel like you stuck the landing, and even the East German judge gave you a 10?
Yeah, it's I can't think of one specific one, but there's been plenty of times where we have a Discord server, and one of the channels on it is where people share stories from. It's called, I think it's the channel is called Stories from the Table, and so people post the coolest stuff there about things that happened in their game that are just completely off the hook stuff that you wouldn't have expected. It's always that way, right? We write these games, and this is one of the things that we love about this hobby is that compared to our video game counterparts, there are no real defined parameters in the imaginative play of tabletop role-playing games, in which you can take it. You can even take a classic module like B2 that people have played the death out of, and yet you can get someone that tells a story of maybe how they interacted with the little mad hermit or the owl bear or the minotaur or anything like that within there, and you can get these wild stories, and you could say, I never heard one like that before. And it's like, and that's what makes this this hobby so fun is the wild and unexpected events.
Yeah, I'm going to use this to sort of segue into something, but I was having a conversation with Rick Meintz from Chaosium the other night, and Rick and I were sort of talking about this, and interestingly enough, he was actually getting ready to go to a scout troop and talk about role-playing games, and we didn't get into a long discussion about that, right? But we did talk briefly about it, and it reminded me after I got off the phone with him, I really was thinking about how I always describe role-playing games, great role-playing games, as collaborative storytelling. That what happens in the course of a game is the stuff that gives you stories to talk about and tell, and just like in real life, sometimes situations occur that then gives you a story to tell other people, and so on and so forth. You know, when you have the shared commonality of we've all been through B1, we've all been through B2, you know, when I can yell Bree Yark and I get a joke, you know, I get people exactly what you did. I get a smile and a nod like,
Yep.
oh shit, I know exactly what that is. That's the stuff that really, really does well, that role-playing does so well. Because we all remember when we managed to pull our fat out of the fire, or we went down swinging and managed to save the party at the cost of our character or whatnot. And that's the stuff that role-playing gives us, that when you're playing Fallout 4 alone in your basement, you don't have that. You don't have the collegial, you don't have that shoulder to shoulder, dice throwing, Frito sharing. You don't have any of that.
Collaboration.
Yes, it's really tough. It's really
Hey,
tough.
can I want to ask Jeff a question real quick, because this is something that we were talking about, just Jeff and I and some other guys, is that, you know, Jeff is one of the last people that worked professionally with Gary Gygax on the Castles of Gig, and he had said something like, it really struck me. He said that, you know, I don't get asked about that time very much, and he was kind of surprised people don't ask him about Gary that much, because he had such a close relationship with Gary for a few years. And so I'm going to throw something out there. What's something about Gary that people don't really know that much about that you were surprised to learn?
You know, I don't know how many people knew how much of a sports fan that he was, but he was. And you know, he was and it wasn't for any Wisconsin teams. It was for, you know, all the Chicago teams.
Yeah, he's a big Bears fan, right? Big Chicago Bears fan.
Big time Bears fan. So that's something that I don't think that people really knew about him, because people are always asking questions about gaming and Appendix N type stuff, you know, about what he was into. And typical D&D questions and rules questions and stuff like that. But, you know, he was really into that. And he didn't broadcast it a lot, but he had his own religious beliefs that he felt strongly about. You know, he was, I don't know what form of Christian you would call him, what he was, but he was a Christian. I think he sort of bounced around with that as far as the denomination of Christianity that he felt was right for him. But that was a part of his life as well that, you know, that a lot of people may not know about. You know, it's just stuff like that. I guess it's just, you know, he was such a great guy. You know, it's beyond his creative genius. He was, and I don't know, you guys may know this or you may not, but he was one of those guys that answered every question that came his way, whether you had got his email address or you engaged with him on a forum. He was regularly engaging at EN World and also on Dragon's Foot. And he would answer every question. And I saw him, you know, at conventions, and he would talk to everybody, and people would share their stories with them about how much D&D meant to them and role-playing games in general. And he was treated everybody with respect. And I thought, you know, this is a guy that not only do I admire his creative genius, but I also admire him as a person, the way he carried himself.
That's really cool. And you're right. I bet you don't get asked enough about Gary Gygax the man. You get asked a lot about Gary Gygax the legend, and Gary Gygax the game creator, and Gary Gygax, creator of Greyhawk. And you probably don't get those questions as much. Just, what do you like to eat? What was his lunch? What
Right.
did he like to joke about? I mean, you don't get asked those questions. It's kind of interesting to hear about that stuff.
There's also a lot of revisionist history, because people like to imagine what he was doing in his later life, but the truth is that he was, as much as we would like to imagine that he was all in with Castle Zagig, he really had his hands in other things that were more interesting to him at the time. And so he had me developing the dungeon and castle complex, which was a great honor. But he clearly could have been doing it all himself. He was providing me outlines and seeds in the forms of like anything as small as a paragraph to up to a page of information, something that he wanted me. He would say, Jeff, put this in somewhere between level 1 and level 3. It doesn't matter where it goes. And he would throw an idea at me. And so that was, that was really cool. But then he would stand back from it. He wasn't involved, because the thing that he was super passionate about in his final 6 months to a year was his legendary Asterogues game that he was working on, which was the science fiction version of Legendary Adventures. And it was a project that he had worked off and on for a long time. So at the time, he has me writing Castle Zagig, and he was sending me his manuscripts for Legendary Asterogues, and he's sending me like 200 pages of material. And he's like, Jeff, let me know what you think of this. I'm like, Gary, I can't do that. I can't, I can only do so much.
I got this other project going on, Gary. Yeah, I got something else here.
Right. And then the other thing that he did was, I see someone's asking up there if he took the train to work. Yeah, because he didn't have his driver's license. So
wow.
The other thing that he was working on was, it was King of England, King of France, which was a card game that was based off the 100 Years' War. He was super passionate about that too. He had an idea of every card in the game having its own individual artwork, and how this whole thing was going to work out as basically a 2-player game, and it was as a card building strategy game, and he was super into that as well. So he was doing all these things, and the reason why I mentioned that the other day was because, like, there's a lot of stuff like that, and I've seen all these biographies on the history of D&D or the history of Gary, and they all touch on variations of the same stuff, and they're all good and everything in their own way. But there's this declining interest in his final years. None of these biographies, like, I worked with him to such an extent in his final 3 years, and no one's ever asked me a single question that has written one of these biographies about him.
Wow.
The only person who's ever shown any interest was Pat Kilbane, who did that wonderful DVD film, The Dreams in Gary's Basement.
Yep, I've talked to Pat.
Yeah, and
that's pretty amazing. It seems like you'd be a kind of a really good source of information. I remember you wrote that in the chat, and I was just like, I can't believe nobody has asked you anything about him, and that's pretty wild. Because,
I mean, I understand why. It only makes sense. There's going to be more interest in the meteoric rise of TSR, and then in Gary's role in it, and then his ousting from the company. There's so much drama in that. So I understand that people are less interested in him sort of, the humbled older Gary just working quietly in his home, but still working on creative works. It has less of that dramatic flair to it, I guess, than sell books.
Right. So, I was privy to something this week, and I want to talk about it for a couple of minutes, and I'm interested to sort of see what you think, Jeff. So Jeff, I think one of the things that I see when I look at the industry is that while the target age should be where we all got into role playing, where you should be looking at 6th, 7th, 8th graders, somewhere in there is a great sort of starting point. And I think Stranger Things absolutely helped 5th edition D&D in that regard, and so on and so forth. I was talking to Rick Meintz earlier this week at Chaosium, because next year Chaosium is publishing a version of Call of Cthulhu where the characters are actually scouts. And it's supposed to be out in the first half of 2026. It's got an interesting name to it. I want to make sure I've got this right, so bear with me a second. But I'm very interested to see what this looks like when it comes out. I'm very interested to see Campfire Tales. That's it. It's called Campfire Tales. And the players are going to play as essentially scouts versus Cthulhu. Now, it is not going to be scouts versus deep ones and mass of Nyarlathotep, and the idea is not to do that, but the idea is to essentially have mystery solving and deduction and so on and so forth. And again, this is some of my impression, for player characters to try to tackle that as kids. And so Hyperborea is certainly not a children's game. I would not classify that or whatever. Do you ever sort of think to yourself that it would be nice to sort of to try to get that part of the market or come up with something?
I don't really think that, to be honest with you. I don't like that idea. I think that when you pander to kids being little kids, and we're not going to have these horrors to overcome, or to have them not face potential character death, or
no, like the characters can die, right?
Oh, okay.
Like one of the things that came up in the discussion was it's very clear that characters can die. There's some muddling, I guess, of the stats. They're trying not to do this as injecting teenagers in Call of Cthulhu, but trying to scale down some of this. And somebody said Nancy Drew versus Hardy Boys versus Lovecraft. I think the better way to think of it is more like we all read Encyclopedia Brown. We all read Alfred Hitchcock and the Three Investigators. There's the long run of Nancy Drew. There's the long run of Hardy Boys, and all the other kinds of things that go back, and so on and so forth. I think this harkens back to that, and it uses the scouting as a layer above that. As a layer.
So when you said scout, I was thinking Boy Scout. So are you talking Cub Scout then?
No. It's scouts. It's not the official U.S. Scout. I guess they've had to create their own sort of scouting organization that mimics some of this. There's some interplay with merit badges. I haven't seen the manuscript yet.
Okay. So I guess what my initial thought was is when I think of scouts, I think of Boy Scouts, and I think of kids that when they become Boy Scouts, they're about I think when you transition from Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts, you're about 11 years old.
Yeah, it's about 6th, 7th grade, somewhere in there.
So 11 or maybe 12. So I then think back to myself at that age and having a Dungeon Master's Guide and reading Gygaxian prose. And I've always been of the opinion of writing up to the reader and not pandering on talking down to the reader or dumbing down the content.
I don't think that's the intention. You're talking about the Jay Ward school, right? So Jay Ward, when he wrote Rocky and Bullwinkle, he absolutely refused to write down to kids. He was adamant that if kids didn't understand the jokes, they'd ask their parents to explain it.
Right, exactly.
Yes. And I don't think that they're going to do that. I think the goal is, instead of breeding with deep ones being a part of this is much more about, I hate to say Scooby-Doo mysteries and so on and so forth, but investigation on a more slightly less cosmic horror-y kind of thing. So we'll see. I don't know.
It could be interesting.
Yes, I'm very interested because this is somebody mentioned Survive This, the Survive This RPG, and it's not that we already have enough people sitting down at a table pretending to be whoever they are and so on and so forth in games. I'm always interested in trying to get more people into role playing. I'm always interested in trying to do, quick start rules and so on and so forth, because exactly what you said, right? The kid who is reading Conan, the kid whose parents got him a copy of the Del Rey Conan the Barbarian trade paperbacks. I want that kid to go out on the internet and discover Hyperborea and be like, what's this?
Right. And that's playing into what you're saying. I really could, for my game, use something that's a starter set that would be basically covering the first, like, say, 3 or 4 levels of play in the game. And so once you simplify it to the first 3 levels, you can can tailor the monsters that you put in it, and you're also limiting it to only going up to second level spells and things like you can have a more compact version of the game that's a more digestible sort of introduction to the game, I think. So I think that would be something that I think about. Something that I should
see that as more like a 32-page book, like almost like a very flimsy, lightweight, not like one of your modules that's Smithsonian and so on and so forth, but something that's just a quick start or
something like that. But I mean, you could have, it depends on how far you want to take it. You can make a box set, and you can have a booklet that's for players and a booklet that's for referees that has a bunch of monsters in it and stuff like that, and maybe a mini adventure.
Right. No, I'm very interested to see how this lands, because Chaosium of the more recent ownership has been very tactical about what they're doing and what they're trying to introduce. This is a setting set in the 20s, which I think is an interesting time, particularly as scouting comes out in that time period, so on and so forth. So I'm very, very interested to see how this all plays.
You're on the heels of World War I.
Yes, before World War II, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep. Gangsters are big.
Yeah, and again,
Roaring 20s, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
When was Gatsby supposed to take place, and was that in the 20s?
So that's the Lost Generation. They've come back from World War I, and they're trying to forget the horrors that they've seen and survived. And I think that's a deplorable novel to inflict on high school students. It's a great idea, but when you're 16, 17, 18, trying to get your head around Gatsby and the Lost Generation and these big Gilded Age mansions on the, it's just next to impossible, right?
I know. It's not.
You do better showing them Babylon and letting them have all the titillation and understanding of Hollywood's decadence before, the Leonardo DiCaprio version of Gatsby is.
Yeah. I'd rather have them read The Frost Giant's Daughter.
Yes.
Tower of the Elephant.
Which of the hundreds of versions of Frost Giant's Daughter would you? That's my trouble right now. Are you reading the new Conan comic book and the new Conan magazine that are coming out?
I am, and I'm not. So I think I have like the first 10. I do things sporadically.
Yes.
And so I've enjoyed them. Yeah.
I'm happy to see it in print. I think there needs to be Conan at a comic book shop. I love the idea that there's a magazine on a newsstand for people to buy.
Yeah.
They just released last month. They released the colored version of issue 1, and I was just, it's just perfect.
Yeah.
This is the stuff that I just live for, and it's all great. What else? There was one other sort of weird role-playing thing this week, Eric. What was it that insulted our intelligence again this week? I can't remember.
Listen,
I know. I'm sorry, Mike. Did you have something?
Were we going to talk Funko Pops?
Oh, that was it.
Oh, but that was not
I'm going to sign
Cynthia
off.
Williams. I guess it is RPG related.
So, dear viewers, if you have ever watched an episode of this show, I think you'll know that the regular hosts of this show hold Funko Pops in disdain is the kindest word we could use.
Womp, womp, womp. Yeah.
Contempt, hatred, loathing. We collectively could form the Anti-Funko League. And And I have said for a number of years, what's really interesting is that Funko is owned by the horrific multi-tentacled Spectre that also owns WizKids and Loot Crate and all the rest. But Funko, over the weekend, after the markets had closed on Friday, Funko announced that their sales were down 14% year to year, and that they were worried they weren't going to be in business a year from now. Now, I don't know if this surprised anyone, but it certainly didn't surprise any of us. And
does that make all that crap collect? No, it doesn't make any of that crap collectible.
No. And I shared an image with Eric that we will not share tonight, but essentially it was an observation about Funko Pops and Funko Pop owners, right, that have rooms filled with these things. That the whole point of Funko Pops was not to help the brands they licensed. That's why they all look the same, because it was to essentially help the Funko brand, not whatever it is that they were licensing from Disney or whoever else. And while I was talking about this with somebody else this week, and I said, these things have lasted longer than troll dolls. They lasted longer than Beanie Babies. But when you look at it, we all knew that the Funko apocalypse was coming. We just weren't sure when it was going to happen.
Well, it had to. Listen. I have a local mall, localish, and it has a store that's devoted to all these, 20-ish old collectible crap, and Japanese manga, lots of Japanese manga, and there is a whole third of the store was always Funko Pops, and I go in with Rach, and she's like, "You want to look at the Funko Pops? Maybe you'll find some D&D stuff." I go, and I will tell her, I have one Funko Pop. I got it from Loot Crate. What a surprise back in the day. And it's Minster Ranger from the classic Baldur's Gate. I'm happy with that. I have one. I don't need more Funko Pops. Trust me.
Who buys Funko Pop? Who are these people buying? So I told everybody this, or I told Eric this story this week. My granddaughter's 17. She's a nerd. She likes comics. She likes anime. She likes all this stuff. We were in a toy store a while back, and there was some Funko Pops. I said, "Hey, you like DC female superheroes? Here's a Batgirl, a Catwoman, and a Black Canary. Would you like a Funko Pop?" Jim, she gave me a look of such disdain. It was like I asked her, "Do you want to drink this glass of warm asparagus?" Like, what, Papa, whatever made you think I like Funko Pops? And so I'm like, well, if they don't have my granddaughter, who are they selling this shit to?
So
who's buying it?
The picture I sent Eric and Mike this week, I'm going to try to clean it up. Somebody's observation: if someone owns a shitload of anime figures, I assume they like a lot of anime. And if someone owns a lot of Funko Pops, I assume their wife is banging someone else.
On that note, I gotta go, guys.
All right, Jim,
thank you.
Thank
that
you.
Might be the line to leave on. Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
But,
yes,
but accurate. So
chat. Oh, you got to move us around because I'm not used to being up here. This is creeping me out.
geez.
I had one Funko Pop, and so my sister-in-law's husband gave me the Funko Pop for Christmas like 2 or 3 years ago, and it was Thor. And it didn't look like Thor. It looked like a Funko Pop somebody tried to paint like Thor, and it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. And it sat in our dining room near the Christmas tree all through the holidays. Because every time I touched it, I was like, why on God's green earth did he give this to me? And finally, what I did is the next year at a Toys for Tots drive, I pitched it into the Toys for Tots drive, praying that it would find its way to a home where somebody would appreciate it. And if you have a room full of them, first of all, I'm glad that your wife has found somebody else, so that's great. But I just don't. I've never understood the allure of these. I didn't understand troll dolls. I didn't understand Thai Beanie Babies. Don't get me wrong, folks. I have a shit ton of Games Workshop miniatures. And sweet Jesus, if the day you paint your last miniature is the day you die, I'm immortal to a factor of 7. So yeah, I got my thing and I'm good. But Funko Pops, I mean, this is the exercise you should do. This is, I've talked about this on the show before. You should go into your Barnes and Noble or whatever with a little pen and make a discrete dot or write the date on the sales tag or on the bottom of the Funko Pop to see how quickly they turn over. Because what I discovered was that my local stores that sell Funko Pops aren't selling them. They literally are just tying up inventory dollars, and they sit and they sit and they sit. And if we're on the cusp of the Funko apocalypse, then the problem is that all those stores, if you go to a game store and they have a shit ton of Funko Pops, I would plead with you. I would beg of you to ask them if they are aware of what Funko said over the weekend. If they are not, show them the quote, show them the story. This made Business Week, it made everywhere. And point that out to them, because this might be the time, this might be the place where they should do an inventory reduction sale and get the Funkos out of their stores. I want to say one other thing. This is important before we sort of get to our usual sort of wrap up stuff. I think Ty Beard, I saw Ty Beard was in the channel somewhere. And what I wanted to say was, I had an occasion earlier this week to speak very well of Ty and speak very well of Mr. Beard's efforts as a lawyer. And I say that because, you know, we are a community on this show. You know, I know most of the people in the comments. I know most of the people in the comments don't like me. That's okay. I'm only on once a week. But really and truly, I've gotten to know a lot of you face to face at North Texas. I know a lot of you face to face from other shows. You know, I'm very glad when somebody says, "Hey, I've got this thing," and I can say, "Well, I know somebody that might be able to help you out." And so I gave a glowing recommendation of Ty this week, and I hope that all works out, and I hope that it works out in a way that doesn't require Ty Beard to put on his angry lawyer boots. But we are a community, right? And we get to know each other, and we get to know our strengths and our weaknesses, and who can help who, and that's what's so great about this. So I wanted to give a shout out to Ty.
No, I saw Ty this weekend at Long Con. We had a great time. Zach was there, Bill Barsh, a lot of the regulars, and it's a great little con. Once again, I'm going to extol the virtues of the small con. About 300 people. It was wonderful. It's like North Texas East. Just move North Texas about 2.5 hours east, and you get Long Con. And we had an absolute blast. My brother was there too. He did not wear a Speedo. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for that. But yeah, we had a great time, and you're right. You know that there's so many good people in this community. Speaking of good people, I'm going to issue a blanket apology here for the last 2 weeks for broadcasting my car. But starting next week, we just drove off the bridge. We're on the beach. I'll be here, and I promise you we will get back to regular broadcasts. And so you won't have to put up with my nonsense now, but I will be sitting in a chair in a room with my computer. So we'll get back to normal starting next week. But I want to apologize. I want to thank everybody for putting up with my shenanigans the last couple weeks. It just worked out that way. I had to pick up Zach last week, and this week I was on the road. So, you know, if nothing else, it leads to lots of yucks as you all make fun of me as I fart on air and do all that. So I make farting noises.
You were molesting a pig, and where that?
Oh, okay. Well, you know, that happens.
It was like Leslie Nielsen with his fart machine. You were just an unstoppable force. You know,
we'll get back to normal next week, folks.
Yes.
We'll get back to normal.
Well, so since you're driving and you can't do it, I'm going to jump into the leap with some with some movies.
Give us some movies, Jim. Give us some movies.
So I got a mix of things, right? So this is the time of year where, if you didn't know it, Criterion has a 50% off sale a couple of times a year, and they're also 50% off, so you can get a lot of stuff that I do some upgrading at this time of year. Their sales are about 6 months apart, but I'll talk about. I've got 4 movies. I'll make it quick. Right, number 1 is last year's Flow. If you haven't seen this, this is an astounding animated movie. I think very, very highly of this. The first time I saw it, it was just great. You can watch it with a family. There's some moments of peril, but really and truly, our hero is the cat, and how this motley group of friends comes together is just really, really wonderful. I won't apologize. I'm a giant Wes Anderson fan, so this was upgrades. I got 4K of The French Dispatch and Isle of Dogs. Not everybody is cut out for a Wes Anderson movie. I get that. People say, like, how do I even get into it? Because some of them are real weird. I always say start with Rushmore. If you like Rushmore, you'll want to go a little further. If, like me, you had to suffer through every episode of Jacques Cousteau when you were a kid, then go for The Life Aquatic. You'll laugh your ass off. Some of the things are bittersweet. Some of them are just terribly sweet. Some of them are laugh out loud funny, but you can't go wrong. Isle of Dogs is great. French Dispatch is a little more out there, but still pretty good. And my last movie of the week, we'll see how it goes. Tron in 4K. This is the first time it's been released in 4K. I'm very interested to see how it looks. I saw the original in 82, 83, whenever it came out. I saw it in Los Angeles. I had a chance to duck in to see Blade Runner. There are times where I really wish I could have just skipped it and gone and go see it there instead, and seen that instead, but I didn't. I saw Tron in the theater when it was originally out. I'm anxious to watch this. It's a snoozer. Unfortunately, the back half of Tron is really slow and painful. The 4K version of Tron Legacy comes in another couple of weeks, so I'm fingers crossed it'll be pretty good. We'll see. And Olivia Wilde, hello. So those are my movies of the week. Flow is amazing. Flow is really amazing. Check your libraries for that. The libraries will probably have, your local library will probably have Flow, and you can watch it with your family, and it's a great animated movie. French Dispatch, it's a niche, but Isle with Dogs is wonderfully funny and has some really great moments. It's a stop motion movie. It's just fine. And Tron, because, well, 20, 40, oh God, how long has it been? 40 odd years later, I'm anxious to see how Tron holds up on the big screen. We'll see.
Christy, my wife and I, or Christy, who's my wife, we saw Moonrise Kingdom at the theater, and we laughed so hard the whole movie. And the funniest thing was, nobody in the theater was laughing. I don't know what was going on, but we found everything hilarious, and it's just like stone silence for everybody else in the theater, and we were dying.
I love that movie. I love the weird scouts in that movie. Having been a scout, I think it's great. But really and truly, I think if like me, my grandparents made me watch every flipping episode of Jacques Cousteau. And it's not that I didn't like it as a kid at first, but like you get tired of, and Henri the cameraman is being menaced by an octopus, right? Like, okay, fine. But when you watch The Life Aquatic, and Bill Murray is the hardened, bitter Jacques Cousteau character. This is a movie that when they made it, after they made it, they had to put in the end credits that no, this is not about Jacques Cousteau. It's just wonderful. It's just, yes. So go look.
You either like his stuff or you don't. It's a real weird. I mean, yes. I think his stuff's funny, but I've had people say I watch a whole movie and won't laugh.
And he has a collection of actors that he likes to use. Bill Murray is one of them. In Rushmore, when Bill Murray, the principal, or when Bill Murray and Jason Schwartzman are both in love with the same woman.
Oh my God, they have that war.
Teenager. Bill Murray's go to war for her.
Yes.
But they go back and forth trying to kill each other briefly. And my favorite part is that Bill Murray, with his cigarette hanging out of his mouth, goes over and takes the kid's bicycle. He cuts the chain with bolt cutters and drives over the bicycle with his car. And the kid, to get even, kills his brakes, so he can't stop the car. It's just this wonderful little montage of bizarre behavior. It's just great. So
give his movies a shot. If you don't like one, try another.
yeah.
But if you go like 2 or 3 and you don't like it, you're probably not going to like anything by him. But
oh God, somebody in the chat just brought up the other horror show of my life, which was if I wanted to watch Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, I had to sit through flipping Lawrence Welk. Do not even get me started about Tom Netherton, Anna Connie, and all the rest of the cast of characters, because I'll just say it. I'm too embarrassed not to just admit this. This is one of the most dire things I've ever admitted to. My grandparents took me to go see Lawrence Welk live at the Huntington Civic Center in Huntington, West Virginia on a tour. And I had to get dressed up in my best Sunday clothes because that's what was expected of a Lawrence Welk audience. I am so ashamed.
Well, I don't think we can top that, folks.
Yikes.
No. We're out on that one.
No.
Yeah. Listen, I want to give a huge thank you to Jeff for coming on, not just on short notice, but being an amazing guest. Really huge thanks. Other than that, thank you. We had 2 people put tips in the till tonight. I can't thank you all enough. You folks are awesome. We do this just for the pure joy of it, but hey.
Well, the chicks, that and the chicks. We do it for the chicks.
Well, I don't know about the chicks. Yeah, remember, we're all married, so I mean,
yeah. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
No, not sure.
Gonna get us in trouble, Mike. So, folks, next live stream will be tomorrow night at 8, Friday at 8, Saturday at 8, and Sunday night special, 9 p.m. on Sunday.
You slacker! You aren't doing anything on Monday and Tuesday. You're slacking. You need to have Monday and Tuesday.
Hey! This past Monday, I was interviewed by Erudite DM. That's going to come up sometime this week. And the last Sunday, Inappropriate Characters Rerolled apparently is coming back on Rumble. So yeah, I'm a little busy. Just saying.
Wow.
All right, folks. Thanks to Mike. Thanks to Jim. Thanks to all of you for coming out. It really, it made our night. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
I'm over.